The Empire sent its deadliest fleet to destroy Earth, but they didn't count on one thing. Humans refused to die quietly. Every strike, every plan, every weapon they launched was met with courage, defiance, and a will the galaxy had never seen. This is the story of a species underestimated by all until they became unstoppable. Don't miss the next epic story. Hit subscribe and join us for more amazing adventures. Rator had served the Galactic Empire for more than 200 years, and in all that time, he had never questioned a single command. He was a soldier built for obedience, trained from a young age to follow orders without emotion, without doubt, without hesitation. But on the day the message arrived from the Galactic Overlord, something inside him shifted, even if he did not understand it yet. The order was simple, almost too simple for a mission so big. Proceed to the third planet of the Sol system, eliminate all human life, and secure the planet for Imperial expansion. Rator read the words again slowly, making sure he had not misunderstood anything. Destroying an entire species was not unusual for the Empire. They had done it many times before, wiping out smaller civilizations that refused to join them. But this time, the target felt different. The Empire described humans as primitive, emotional, unpredictable creatures who had somehow survived longer than expected. The Overlord called them a nuisance species, nothing more than pests standing in the way of the Empire's path. Rator's job was to erase them quickly and cleanly. He had expected a challenge worthy of his fleet, but when he requested more details about the enemy, the Overlord dismissed his concerns. "They are weak," the Overlord said. "They panic easily. They lack unity. And their technology is centuries behind ours." Rator accepted the words because he had no choice. Obedience was all he knew. Still, he opened the holographic files sent with the order, expecting to find records of humans cowering or collapsing in fear of past alien sightings. Instead, he found scattered reports of humans fighting among themselves, building strange weapons, racing toward the stars despite their limitations. It confused him. If they were as weak as the Empire claimed, why had they not died out already? He watched old human broadcasts recorded secretly by alien probes. Humans laughing, crying, building, arguing, helping each other, and sometimes hurting each other too. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and loud. But there was something else in their eyes, a kind of fire he could not describe. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. When he finally stood before his crew to announce the mission, everyone expected a straightforward extermination. His officers smiled with confidence, some even excitement. The younger soldiers whispered proudly about how they would return home as heroes after wiping out an entire world. But Rator felt none of their excitement. He felt something closer to unease, as if the order carried a weight he could not shake off. Still, he activated the fleet's engines and set a course for the Sol system. Thousands of ships lit up the darkness of space, moving together like a single giant machine. Rator walked through the command deck of his flagship, inspecting every station, every weapon system. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. And yet, he could not forget the old human broadcasts, the strange spark in their eyes, the stubbornness in their faces. As the fleet approached the outer edges of Earth's solar system, he replayed the Overlord's final message again. "Destroy them quickly," the voice said. "Do not allow them to speak. Do not allow them to resist. They are animals pretending to be a civilization." But Rator found himself wondering, why send such a huge fleet against a species the Empire believed to be so weak? Why command absolute silence? Why fear communication? The questions had no answers, so he buried them in the back of his mind. They were dangerous thoughts, forbidden thoughts. The Empire demanded loyalty above all else, and he had never failed them before. He told himself humans were just another mission, another mark on the Empire's long history of conquest. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that this mission would not be like the others. Something about Earth felt different. Something about humans felt impossible to predict. As the blue and green planet came into view on his screens, Rator felt the unease grow stronger. He told himself it was nothing. Only nerves, only the weight of responsibility. Yet he could not shake the feeling that the Overlord's order was hiding a truth the Empire did not want him to know. And he had no idea that within days, he would learn the truth for himself. Humans were not weak, and they would not die quietly. They would fight in ways he had never seen. They would challenge every belief he had, and they would force him to question the very purpose of his existence. But for now, all he could do was follow the order and begin the invasion, unaware that this mission would change him forever. When Rator's massive fleet entered Earth's orbit, he expected silence, confusion, and fear from the humans below. He imagined their systems failing, their leaders panicking, and their defenses collapsing before he even fired a single shot. That was how most species reacted when confronted with a fully armed Imperial armada. But within minutes, he realized Earth was nothing like the worlds he had conquered before. The first sign of trouble appeared when his scanners began to flicker. At first, his crew thought it was a malfunction in their equipment, but then the interference spread across multiple ships at once. Human communication towers were blasting strange signals that scrambled alien readings. Nothing like this had happened in any previous invasion. Humans were not panicking. They were jamming the enemy's vision as if they had prepared for this moment. Rator leaned forward in his command chair, studying the planet's surface through distorted visuals. He expected chaos on Earth, people running in fear, governments collapsing. But instead, he saw rapid movement. Military vehicles rushing to bases, emergency teams activating, satellites shifting positions. Humans were reacting with speed he had never witnessed from any primitive species. Everything looked too organized for a civilization supposedly centuries behind. The alien commander ordered a low-orbit scan, but even that failed halfway through. Human hackers had already begun attacking the alien fleet's software. The idea shocked Rator. No species had ever fought back this quickly, let alone used digital warfare against Empire systems, which were considered impossible to break. The alarms ringing through his ship made it clear humans had somehow inserted disruptive code into their network. What kind of species does this? One of Rator's officers muttered, staring at the screens in disbelief. How can they respond this fast? Rator didn't know, but he felt that same uneasy spark inside him again. The same feeling he had when he first saw human recordings. There was something fierce in this species, something stubborn, something that refused to die quietly. On the surface of Earth, human leaders were already making announcements. Entire nations that usually argued with each other began sharing information instantly. Scientists in different countries connected their labs through emergency communication networks. Soldiers were deployed not with fear, but with determination. Civilians began moving into shelters in an orderly way, helping each other instead of panicking. Rator couldn't understand it. Humanity was acting like a single united organism, not a scattered, weak species, the Empire described. By the time the alien fleet positioned itself for the first strike, humans had already launched their own countermeasure. Hundreds of drones rising from hidden bunkers and rooftops. They weren't powerful enough to destroy alien ships, but they forced Rator's fleet to waste time shooting them down. That bought humans precious minutes. A tactic no empire had expected from a supposedly inferior world. Then came the unexpected attack. From deep underground, humans fired something the aliens had never seen before, an electromagnetic pulse that spread across the upper atmosphere. It didn't destroy the fleet, but it forced their shields to reboot, leaving them vulnerable for a short moment. No primitive world had ever exploited weaknesses like this. It was clever, risky, and bold, almost reckless, but effective. Rator found himself gripping the sides of his chair, struggling to understand how humans could coordinate so well despite their limited technology. He watched as Earth's forces used every scrap of information, every tool, every trick available to them. They weren't fighting like a weak species. They were fighting like a species that had been preparing for an invasion long before it happened. Even human civilians joined the resistance. Young people with laptops were hacking alien signals from their bedrooms. Scientists were turning old satellites into makeshift scanners. Local radio stations were broadcasting emergency codes. It was messy, unorganized on the surface, but somehow powerful. Humans used their chaos like a weapon. For the first time, Rator felt something he hadn't felt in centuries of war: respect. He didn't want to admit it, but it was there. Humans were not behaving like prey. They were behaving like predators forced into a corner. The Empire's reports had been wrong, dangerously wrong. The alien commander watched Earth's response with growing realization. Humans were not just resisting, they were adapting, learning, evolving right in front of him. Every attack the Empire launched was met with something unexpected, something creative, something aggressive. Rator stared at the blue planet on his screen, the swirling clouds, the glowing lights of cities, and he understood one thing clearly. This invasion would not be easy. This species would not surrender. They would fight until their last breath, and maybe even after that. He whispered to himself, almost in awe. They refused to die quietly. And deep down, he sensed that this was only the beginning. The real battle had not even started yet, and already humans had shaken the confidence of an entire galactic fleet. The Overlord had underestimated Earth, but Rator now knew the truth. Humans were dangerous. Humans were unpredictable, and humans were ready to fight, no matter the cost. When the invasion finally began, Rator expected humans to collapse under the first wave of Imperial fire. He had seen countless worlds fall this way. One strike, one moment of overwhelming force, and the enemy would surrender or scatter in terror. But Earth reacted in a way that shocked every alien watching from orbit. The first bombardment targeted military bases, communication centers, and power grids. Yet, before the alien weapons even hit the ground, humans had already started moving their forces. Somehow, they predicted the targets. As explosions lit up the night sky, human soldiers rushed into underground bunkers and armored shelters, refusing to be caught unprepared. The Empire's usual strategy of fear did not work here. Then came the part Rator never expected. Humans counterattacked instantly. Not hours later, not days later, but minutes. It felt impossible, like they had rehearsed this war long before it started. The first wave of human counterattacks came in the form of drone swarms. Thousands of small, fast, unpredictable machines launched from rooftops, secret hangars, and even civilians' garages. They moved erratically, weaving through alien fire like angry insects. For a moment, Rator's crew laughed at them, until they realized the drones were targeting weak points on the alien ships, jamming sensors, blinding cameras, and forcing pilots to waste energy shooting them down. These weren't weapons designed to destroy. They were designed to disrupt, irritate, confuse. The Empire had never seen tactics like this. The drones forced entire squadrons to retreat just to recalibrate their systems. Rator leaned forward as reports flooded in, confusion spreading through the fleet. The humans weren't stronger. They were smarter. They turned cheap tools into powerful weapons simply by using them in ways no other species ever had. Before the aliens could regain control, the second wave hit. Deep underground, humans fired enormous railgun blasts powered by magnetic acceleration. The beams shot out of hidden silos with terrifying speed, smashing into alien destroyers and knocking them off course. Some ships spiraled downward, crashing into empty fields or oceans. Others took heavy damage that forced emergency landings on the moon. Rator felt his chest tighten. He had fought many wars, but never against a species so unpredictable. Every time he thought he understood humans, they did something completely different. Humans weren't fighting by the Empire's rules. They were breaking them one by one. Another alarm sounded. This time, the threat came from cyberspace. Human hackers had breached low-level alien firewalls, something Rator believed was impossible. On his screen, symbols flashed as human code began infecting navigation systems, turning off lights on some ships, disabling doors on others. For the first time in his long career, Rator saw Imperial systems being taken apart by a species that still used old satellites and outdated computers. How are they doing this? One of the alien engineers shouted in panic. Their technology is too primitive. But Rator understood now. Technology wasn't everything. Determination mattered, creativity mattered, and humans had both in dangerous amounts. The next strike came from the skies. Jets designed for Earth's atmosphere flew patterns that confused alien targeting systems. Pilots risked their lives diving toward the alien fleet before releasing missiles at the last possible second. The aircraft couldn't match alien speed, but they made up for it with insane bravery. Some pilots sacrificed themselves to protect others, crashing into alien crafts to buy a few seconds for their squad mates. Rator felt something twist inside him, respect mixed with dread. Then something even more shocking happened. In several cities, human civilians began fighting too, not with guns or heavy weapons, but with knowledge. Engineers rewired power grids to overload alien drones. College students hacked alien communication channels. Radio operators broadcast false coordinates to confuse alien scouts. The whole planet was fighting together, as if moment was part of their DNA. Rator watched in disbelief as humans turned their chaos into their strength. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't freeze in fear. They adapted as fast as the battle changed. Humans fought like a species with nothing to lose and everything to protect. As reports poured in, the alien commander finally understood that this invasion had already gone terribly wrong. The Empire had sent him to destroy Earth in a single sweep. But humans were pushing back with such force that his fleet looked fragile for the first time in centuries. He stared at the blue planet below, realizing a truth the Empire had refused to acknowledge. Humans might not have advanced ships or perfect technology, but they had something more powerful, an unbreakable will, and a mind that never stopped fighting, even when death stood directly in front of them. Rator sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. The humans were not weak. They were not primitive. They were not afraid. They were warriors in their own wild, unpredictable way, and they had just proven a terrifying fact. They would not let themselves be destroyed quietly. They would resist until their last breath, and maybe even beyond that. Rator had seen bravery before, but never like this. As the invasion dragged on, humans showed a kind of strength he could not understand, a spirit that refused to break even when their cities were burning. Their weapons were weaker, their technology was older, and their chances of winning were almost zero. But still they fought with a fire he had never seen in any other species. From the command deck of his flagship, Rator observed the chaos unfolding on Earth. Entire neighborhoods had turned into battlefields, but instead of fleeing, humans stayed behind to protect each other. Firefighters moved through streets filled with smoke and falling debris, pulling survivors from destroyed buildings even while alien drones flew overhead. They knew they could die any minute, but they kept going. Their courage didn't come from training. It came from something deeper, something no empire could measure. In another part of the world, a team of engineers worked inside a collapsing power plant, trying to restart an emergency grid that would bring communication back to the city. The ground shook around them, dust rained from the ceiling, and alarms screamed in every direction. But they ignored everything except the job in front of them. Some of them were crying from fear, some were praying quietly, yet not a single one stopped working. Rator watched them through drone footage and felt an unfamiliar ache in his chest. They were ordinary people, but they acted like soldiers. Soldiers, too, were pushing themselves beyond normal limits. Human military forces fought without rest, moving from one destroyed city to the next. Their weapons overheated, their vehicles ran out of fuel, yet they found ways to keep going. Some dragged wounded teammates miles across rough terrain. Others stood their ground against alien machines, even when they ran out of ammunition. They used whatever they could find, broken metal, abandoned cars, pieces of walls, to build temporary defenses. Rator's officers whispered nervously, calling humans unstable, unpredictable, reckless. They couldn't understand how a species could keep fighting when logic said they should surrender. In the Empire, soldiers were trained from childhood. Loyalty was forced. Bravery was taught like a lesson, but humans seemed to be born with it. It wasn't something they were ordered to do. It was something they chose. Even when hopelessness surrounded them like smoke, they found a reason to stand again. One moment hit Rator harder than any other. A video from Earth showed a group of doctors and nurses treating injured civilians inside a half-destroyed hospital. Walls were cracked, lights flickered, alien attacks continued outside, but they refused to leave their patients. A nurse with blood on her face held a child's hand and whispered comforting words while explosions shook the ground. Rator felt a strange pull inside him, an emotion he hadn't felt in centuries. He didn't want to admit it, but he admired them. Across Earth, humans displayed the same strange courage. A father shielded his family with his own body when debris rained down. A group of students used their phones to guide soldiers to a hidden alien device. An old man stood in front of an alien scout machine with nothing but a wooden stick, refusing to let it pass his street. Humans weren't just fighting with weapons. They were fighting with their hearts, their memories, their love for their planet and for each other. Every report Rator received made his uncertainty grow stronger. The Empire had described humans as weak, emotional, and divided. But what he saw was the exact opposite. Humans were emotional, yes, but those emotions made them stronger. Their fear pushed them to act. Their pain pushed them to protect. Their love pushed them to survive. He doubted any other species in the galaxy could endure such heavy losses and still continue fighting with this much intensity. For the first time, his soldiers began to hesitate. They had no training for an enemy like this. The more humans resisted, the more alien morale broke. Some alien pilots refused to fly back into areas where humans had stood their ground too fiercely. Rumors spread throughout the fleet. Whispers saying humans were monsters, shaped by their dangerous world, capable of impossible things. Rator knew those whispers came from fear, but he also knew they were partly true. Humans lived on a death world, a planet full of storms, predators, disease, and harsh environments. Maybe that was why they were so hard to kill. Maybe that was why their spirit refused to crumble. They were survivors by nature. As he watched another scene of human bravery, a group of strangers forming a chain to rescue someone trapped under rubble, Rator closed his eyes for a moment. He felt something almost painful inside him, a realization he did not want to accept. These humans were worth more than the Empire believed. They were fighting not just for survival, but for one another. And there was no weapon in the galaxy strong enough to break a spirit like that. Rator knew then that this war would not be simple. Humans would not surrender. They would not kneel. They would not die quietly. They would fight until there was nothing left but the fire in their hearts. And even then, the flames would burn on. When the humans captured the alien device, everything in the war changed. Rator did not understand how they managed to take it. It was a piece of advanced Imperial technology, built to resist damage and protected by layers of security that even most alien engineers could not break. Yet somehow, humans had taken it from a crashed scout ship and carried it into one of their underground labs. And within hours, they had already started studying it. Rator watched the reports from orbit with disbelief. His officers insisted that humans were too primitive to understand alien machinery. They said the device was safe because humans would never figure out how it worked. But Rator had already learned not to underestimate these strange, stubborn creatures. Inside the human lab, scientists worked without rest. Some were experts in physics, others in electronics, and many were simply talented engineers with a natural ability to solve problems. The device was damaged, sparking dangerously, humming with unstable energy. But they surrounded it with tools, scanners, and computers. Their faces showed exhaustion, fear, and determination all at once. They knew one mistake could kill them, but they continued anyway. Human intelligence agencies protected the lab, soldiers guarded the entrances, drones circled the skies, and communication lines buzzed constantly as experts from around the world sent advice and data. All differences between nations vanished. Every scientist and engineer became part of the same unified brain, focused on one goal, unlocking alien technology and turning it into a weapon for humanity. When the first breakthrough happened, the humans celebrated quietly but seriously. They had figured out how to reroute the device's energy source. They discovered its weakness, its structure, its hidden power cell. The Empire believed humans needed decades to understand such tech, but it took them less than a day to make progress that frightened even Rator. As the hours passed, the humans worked faster. Their minds adapted to the new information like they were born for it. They built temporary shields, ran simulations, and connected the alien device to human computers, which caused sparks, smoke, and a few small explosions. Yet no one backed away. They kept adjusting, repairing, solving. Their courage did not come from strength. It came from curiosity and desperation. Two things the Empire never considered dangerous until now. Finally, the humans discovered something that changed the war entirely. The device held a type of energy that no human weapon had ever used before. If they could control it, they could create a counterattack that would hit the alien fleet harder than anything Earth had launched so far. They worked through the night, their eyes burning, their hands shaking. Some scientists collapsed from exhaustion, others took their place without asking questions. The world outside was falling apart. Cities burning, people fighting for survival. Yet inside that lab, humanity's hope grew brighter with every new discovery. When they finally succeeded, the lab filled with a strange blue light. The alien device hummed smoothly, perfectly stable for the first time. The scientists stared at it in awe. They had done the impossible. They had built a hybrid weapon, half human, half alien, something stronger than either species had ever created alone. Rator felt a cold rush of fear when he learned what humans had done. He had fought many enemies, but none had ever turned Imperial technology back against the Empire. Humans were not only resisting, they were learning from the Empire, evolving faster than any species he had encountered. It was as if the war was teaching them in real time, sharpening them, strengthening them, transforming them into something more dangerous with every minute. Then the counterstrike began. The humans launched modified railguns infused with alien energy. Missiles with hybrid cores shot into the sky, their trails glowing with unnatural light. For the first time in the invasion, the alien fleet was pushed back in panic. Ships lost control, shields cracked. Engines exploded unexpectedly. A single blast from the new human weapon tore through 3 alien cruisers, leaving the crews stunned and terrified. Rator stared at the battlefield, his hands shaking. He had underestimated humans. The Empire had underestimated humans. They were not fighting like victims. They were fighting like inventors, like survivors, like warriors who refused to accept defeat. His officers panicked as more ships fell. They shouted about malfunctioning systems, about unexpected human attacks, about energy readings that made no sense. The Empire's perfect machines were failing against a species that still used duct tape and homemade repairs. And in that moment, Rator felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. Real fear. Not for his life, but for the truth he had discovered. Humans were not weak. They were not primitive. They were not easy to destroy. They were rising. They were adapting. They were becoming something the Empire had never faced before. And for the first time, Rator realized the invasion might not end with the Empire's victory. It might end with humanity proving to the entire galaxy that they refused to die quietly, and that they would fight until their last breath, no matter who or what tried to destroy them. The human counterattack was stronger than anything Rator had ever imagined. His fleet, which had once felt invincible, was now struggling to stay in formation. Ships that had been sleek and powerful a few days ago now floated crippled in orbit, their shields flickering, engines overheating, and weapon systems failing. Humans had not only learned how to fight, they had learned how to fight them, and the results were devastating. Rator's officers shouted constantly, trying to coordinate what little control they still had over the fleet. Panic spread faster than fire across his command deck. As the humans' hybrid weapons hit alien cruisers one after another, crews on his flagship began questioning the mission. Some whispered about surrender. Others refused to fight, refusing to step into battle against enemies they could not predict. Every human tactic seemed designed not just to attack, but to confuse, demoralize, and destroy the alien will. On the ground, human forces kept advancing, moving through cities the aliens had thought were destroyed. Engineers repaired roads, bridges, and communication networks immediately after attacks. Soldiers used guerrilla tactics to ambush retreating alien units, and civilians helped them by scouting locations, sending real-time information, or simply standing in defiance to block alien movement. The planet itself seemed alive with resistance. And Rator realized that humanity's unpredictability was now their greatest weapon. Even his most experienced officers admitted in private that they had never seen a species fight like this. They called it madness, recklessness, and chaos. Yet the chaos had order, the recklessness had purpose, and the madness had strategy. Humans improvised with every tool they could find, converting abandoned factories into command centers, vehicles into mobile bunkers, and communication satellites into powerful jamming stations. The aliens could not anticipate these moves because humans did not act like any other species. They were creative, adaptive, and fearless. The more humans pushed, the weaker the alien morale became. Crews began refusing orders to fire on civilian areas, knowing it would only strengthen human resistance. Pilots hesitated, engineers questioned commands, and soldiers openly argued about strategy. Rator had never seen such a breakdown in discipline among his fleet. His officers begged him to retreat, claiming the humans were a fluke, a dangerous anomaly, but an anomaly that had already destroyed hundreds of ships. As the battle continued, humans demonstrated acts of bravery that shook even Rator. A group of young civilians used makeshift EMP devices to disable a squadron of alien drones, risking their lives to protect soldiers nearby. In another city, firemen and volunteers pulled wounded soldiers from debris while alien lasers rained down around them. Scientists worked on hybrid weapons in buildings that shook from explosions, refusing to leave until they had completed their work. These were not trained soldiers in the imperial sense. They were ordinary people performing extraordinary acts, and it terrified the aliens. For the first time, Rator began doubting the mission itself. Every calculation of victory he had made before entering orbit now seemed meaningless. Humans were learning, evolving, and counterattacking faster than any species should have been able to. Entire squadrons of the Empire were retreating after minimal resistance, forced to flee while humans reorganized and struck again. Earth was no longer a target. It was a trap, a gauntlet, a proving ground for a species that refused to surrender. Even the strongest ships of the fleet were beginning to fail. Shields flickered under hybrid human attacks, engines went offline mid-flight, and weapon systems jammed in critical moments. Rator felt panic rise inside him, a sensation he had rarely experienced in centuries of warfare. He realized that not only was the invasion failing, but it was failing in a way that exposed the weaknesses of every tactic the Empire had ever used. In secret meetings, some of his officers began to whisper about retreat. Some suggested abandoning the mission entirely. They called Earth a death trap, and humans a species too dangerous to fight. Rator listened silently, knowing that any suggestion of retreat was treasonous. Yet he could not deny the truth. Humans were stronger than anyone had predicted, and his fleet was breaking under pressure. By the end of the day, the invasion had stalled completely. The humans had reclaimed major cities, stabilized their communication networks, and repaired key infrastructure. The alien forces were scattered, damaged, and demoralized. Ships limped back to orbit, crews exhausted and fearful. Rator realized that humanity was not just surviving. They were winning small battles every hour, learning from each encounter and becoming more formidable with each passing moment. For the first time in his career, Rator understood that the Empire's greatest mistake was underestimating humanity. They were not weak. They were not predictable. They were dangerous, creative, adaptive, and relentless. And he knew deep down that this war would not end with a simple strike or surrender. Humans refused to die quietly. They would fight to the very last, and the Empire's orders were no longer enough to control the outcome. As the battle raged on, Rator received the Overlord's final message, a strict command that left no room for hesitation. Destroy Earth at any cost. Complete your mission. Leave nothing alive. The words were cold, absolute, and terrifying, and yet, for the first time, Rator hesitated. His eyes stayed fixed on the planet below, where humans were still fighting with determination, courage, and a stubborn defiance that he could not ignore. For centuries, Rator had followed orders without question, believing in the supremacy of the Empire and the inevitability of victory. But Earth was different. Humans were different. Every day, they adapted faster than he could anticipate. Their hybrid weapons were improving, their strategy was evolving, and their morale remained unbroken. The planet itself seemed alive with resistance, every corner of it united in defiance. He thought about the acts of bravery he had witnessed. The firefighters running into burning buildings, the soldiers protecting civilians with nothing but courage, the engineers and scientists working around the clock on alien technology to build weapons capable of countering his fleet. And perhaps most importantly, he thought about the human spirit. That strange, unmeasurable force that had allowed them to survive every assault, every strategy, every weapon the Empire had thrown at them. The Overlord's message demanded destruction, but as Rator looked at Earth, he found it impossible to comply blindly. The humans were not just fighting. They were showing him something he had never seen in the galaxy. They were fighting for love, for hope, for each other. They were a species worth more than the Empire had ever given them credit for, and the thought of annihilating them left a weight in his chest that he could not shake. He gathered his officers for a briefing, his tone unusually quiet. "The mission continues," he said, but the words felt hollow. His officers noticed the hesitation. Some grew worried, others angry. "Commander, we must follow the Overlord's orders," one of them insisted. "If we fail, our fleet will be destroyed, and we will be executed." Yet Rator could not find the certainty in their words. His mind was filled with the countless images of human resilience, courage, and determination. For hours, he studied the battlefield, watching as humans anticipated alien movements, countered attacks, and rescued each other from impossible situations. They were resourceful, clever, and relentless, turning disasters into opportunities, every setback into a lesson. With every strike, they grew stronger, forcing his fleet to retreat, improvise, and struggle, and Rator began to question the very foundation of the Empire's belief in its own superiority. He remembered the device humans had captured and turned against his fleet, how they had learned to use it in ways even Imperial engineers could not predict. He remembered their bravery, not only on the battlefield, but in everyday acts of courage, in ordinary citizens helping one another, in leaders uniting their people against impossible odds. He realized that humanity was more than just a species. It was a force of nature, unpredictable, unstoppable, and alive with a will that the Empire could not control. The Overlord's voice echoed in his mind, commanding absolute obedience, but Rator could no longer hear it clearly. Instead, he heard the humans, their cries of defiance, their chants of hope, their screams for each other as they fought tirelessly to survive. Something inside him shifted, a spark of doubt growing into a flame, questioning loyalty, morality, and the very meaning of his duty. After long deliberation, Rator made a choice that would change the course of the war. He could follow the Overlord's orders and destroy Earth, ensuring his loyalty to the Empire, or he could do the unthinkable, protect the humans, defy the Overlord, and risk everything he had ever known. His decision was not easy, and fear gripped him. Yet, the determination in human eyes had convinced him that this species deserved a chance. In secret, he began preparing to act against his own fleet, disabling certain weapons, rerouting communication, and creating openings that would allow humans to survive. It was a dangerous move. One misstep could mean death for him and anyone he commanded. Yet for the first time in his life, Rator felt the weight of true choice, not as a soldier of the Empire, but as a witness to the strength of an indomitable species. As he watched Earth from orbit, the planet still scarred but unbroken, he whispered quietly to himself, "They will not die quietly." And in that moment, he knew the war had changed. The humans had not only survived, they had awakened something inside him, something that would make him choose them over the Empire, something that would alter the fate of the galaxy forever. Rator had made a choice that would change everything. He could no longer follow the Overlord's command to destroy Earth. He had seen humans fight in ways no species in the galaxy ever had. They had shown courage, creativity, and resilience that no amount of Imperial power could crush. And so, standing on the command deck of his flagship, he took the most dangerous action of his life. He turned against his own fleet. He began by disabling the superweapons aboard his ships. The devices that could have wiped out entire cities, annihilated millions, and left Earth in ruins were carefully shut down, one by one. Without these weapons, the Empire's advantage was gone, and humans had a chance to survive. His officers were shocked. Some refused to comply. Others argued violently. But Rator stood firm. He had made his decision, and nothing could sway him. Next, he broadcast a message to the entire galaxy, a message that would mark him as a traitor. "The Empire has lied about humanity," he said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "They are not weak. They are not primitive. They are not easily destroyed. Any attempt to exterminate them will fail. I refuse to participate in their destruction." The transmission went out through every channel, reaching fleets, worlds, and stations. The Overlord's fury would be unimaginable, but Rator did not care. Back on Earth, humans watched the skies as alien ships began to retreat. Confusion spread through the remaining invaders, who had relied on fear and technology to crush humanity. Without the superweapons, they were just ships and soldiers, and humans knew how to fight them. Humans had already proven they could survive anything. But now, with the invaders' power weakened, they had hope. The same hope that had kept them alive through every strike, every attack, every near-death moment. Rator observed humans helping each other once more, firefighters rescuing civilians, soldiers protecting the vulnerable, engineers repairing and upgrading their hybrid weapons, children and teenagers sending coded messages, and civilians guiding military units through the streets. They were still fighting, still moving forward, still refusing to die quietly, and he felt a strange pride swelling inside him, something he had never felt for another species before. The Empire was furious, as Rator knew it would be. Reports flooded in from other fleets, commanders questioning his loyalty, armies demanding his execution. The Overlord himself would never forgive this betrayal. Yet Rator had already made peace with that. His loyalty was no longer to a distant, cruel ruler. It was to life, to courage, to a species that had proven itself worthy of survival, worthy of respect. On the ground, humans sensed the turning point. They did not know the full story, but they saw alien ships retreating, systems shutting down, and enemy morale collapsing. It was a victory born of human determination, ingenuity, and bravery, but also of one alien commander's choice to defy a tyrant. The combination of human resilience and Rator's decision created a moment that would be remembered in history, a moment that proved that even in the darkest times, hope could survive. Rator watched Earth one last time. The planet scarred from battle, but still alive. Green forests, blue oceans, and cities still burning yet resisting. He knew that humanity would rebuild, grow stronger, and continue to fight for its future. They had been underestimated, dismissed, and almost destroyed, yet they had survived. They had refused to die quietly, and their victory was a testament to their spirit, to the fire that no empire could extinguish. As he prepared to leave Earth's orbit, Rator reflected on what he had learned. Humanity was unpredictable, creative, resilient, and capable of inspiring even those who came to destroy them. The Empire had underestimated them at its own peril, and in doing so, it had created a legend. Rator would carry the story of humanity's courage with him for the rest of his life. Even in exile or punishment, he would remember. In the end, Earth was saved. Not by perfect technology, not by overwhelming power, but by the unbreakable will of a species that refused to be erased. And Rator, once a servant of the Empire, became an unlikely hero, a witness and protector of humanity. His choice had ensured that the human story continued, a story of defiance, hope, and courage, proving to the galaxy that they were far stronger than anyone had ever believed. And as the last alien ships disappeared into the void, Rator whispered to himself quietly, a promise to remember and honor what he had seen. They will not die quietly. And in those words lay the truth of humanity, a truth that would echo throughout the stars, inspiring those who heard it for generations to come.